much. I rarely come to such debate events because I have to say that the discussion around Israel-Palestine, this kind of arguments, are things that I've heard all my life, and I'm quite sick of it. I'm an activist. I'm a pragmatist, and I'm drawn to being the woman because I'm the only woman on the panel. So my usual responses to such panels is, okay, children, stop bickering, now what do we do? I've heard it all. I've heard all about the history, 3,000 years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years. I don't know where my ancestors were 3,000 years ago. I know that my grandparents came from Poland, Lithuania, Eastern Europe. I know that they were Jewish. I know that they were Jewish in a very different way in which I am Jewish today. And I think that one of the main lessons from Jewish history for me is a lesson about human rights, respect of minority rights, the idea that people all have some equal values that we should respect. A lot of lessons that the international community has adopted after First World War, the Second World War, very much after also the lessons from the Jewish Holocaust. And I think it's very important for us to hold that in our hand as our kushan, instead of some other, or in adding to some other books, whichever books you want to add to it. Talking about this discussion, another word about this discussion is, as Jonathan said very clearly, it's also a very Jewish discussion. And when you start this discussion about Israel-Palestine in a very Jewish setting, you also set some of the content of it. Because it is obvious that we will want to hear more about Jewish history, about Jewish rights, about what's good for the Jews, whatever we decide is good for the Jews, and so on and so forth. But it is crucial to understand that you cannot talk about any kind of future or even present in Israel-Palestine without the Palestinian voice. And the Palestinian voice is always vilified, it's always silenced, and it's absent. It's really absent. I cannot speak for Palestinians, but I can speak as a witness and tell you that beyond all these scholarly discussions about Israel-Palestine, there are people whose lives are being crushed every day. Okay, Israelis live in fear, that's true. Americans live in fear from terrorism too. Okay? And there are people of different classes that have different life experiences. But you cannot compare all that to the experience of someone who lives without any political rights, or of someone who lives without any civil rights. Somebody whose life is governed by a foreign military occupation. There is such a thing. The US government acknowledges that territories taken by Israel in 1967 are under military occupation. The Israeli government does not employ its laws over these territories. What does it mean? It means that, for example, in the West Bank, Jewish settlers and Palestinian indigenous population or refugees living there have a very different set of laws that govern their lives. There is no democracy there. Palestinians cannot organize, they definitely cannot demonstrate. And when I say cannot, I mean that people are taken from their houses in the middle of the night, held without trial, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. Sometimes they are tortured just in order to make them tell about their neighbors who might have helped them organize demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations. And this is illegal under military law. We are not talking about a democracy. I live in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is a bubble, you know. In Tel Aviv, we can live our entire lives and think that we live in Amsterdam. It's very similar to the bubble here in the US, so people don't see the racism around them and so on. But 20 minutes from Tel Aviv, when I just got the opportunity to actually go and cross the lines and actually be with people, I actually found out that there are people who live 20 minutes from me with absolutely no rights. And the people who govern their lives are soldiers of the Israeli military, in which many of us have served, unfortunately. For me, I don't know if I can speak for others. And these soldiers, which for me look like family and friends, for them they look like a real threat because they shoot people with impunity. Now, I don't want to participate in this blame game of who started it. It's juvenile and it's stupid and it's not helping anyone. And I don't want to blame Israel for these crimes being committed daily against civilians. But you cannot blame this violator because they have all this power to do so, they have all the incentive to do so, and they have all the impunity to do so. So my question, and the same is true for the US government that allows for it to continue. So my question as an activist and as a peace activist and somebody who lives on the ground and wants to create a better future for people who live in this country, I'm, by the way, a pacifist, my question is what to do. Okay, how can we change that? What is there for us to do? The question for the panel was about peace and security, and of course, what I'm trying to tell you so far is whose peace, whose security. And you might think I'm talking only about Palestinian security, but also about women and about people. People think here about security, so they immediately want to have military advisors and generals and to talk about it. You always get these male panels. Because security is a male topic and you have security experts. But back in Israel with the Coalition of Women for Peace, we are trying to redefine that term. What about job security? What about security from crime? Feeling secure in your own house. What about security from sexual violence, from racism, from poverty? Think about your own fears in your own life. Yes, there is a fear of terrorist attacks, but where are all the other fears? And where is our collective organizing in the form of a state or any kind of political organization that is supposed to give us some security? All of this is being harmed in Israel-Palestine in the name of a very narrow idea of what is security. And this narrow idea stands upon the idea that you have to keep a whole people, the Palestinian people, under total military repression and hold them in little enclaves, push them away from their lands, from their natural resources, exploit their labor, siege them in Gaza, not let them in or out, don't let anything go in without. This is a fantasy of total control over people's lives. This fantasy cannot be sustained. It is a very violent fantasy, and it creates more and more violence of both sides. But to begin with, the system of control is a terrible system of violence. In the end, it means children in prison. It means torture. It means what it means everywhere around the world in similar regime. It is not unusual. It is not unique. This is how occupations, colonizing areas, this is how it's being maintained, by the force of violence. I'm part of a movement that Jonathan has already declared here, which is a movement that calls for people of conscience from all around the world to use the tools of non-cooperation, peaceful non-cooperation, in order to circumvent the inactivity or the total paralysis of governments around the world in holding Israel accountable for human rights violations and violations of international law. Human rights and international law, I remind you, these are the main lessons from World War I and World War II and the Jewish Holocaust. This is in our interest to make sure that people are treated equally, that we create a new kind of political organization in Israel-Palestine. It doesn't matter if you have 1 state, 2 states, 15 states, I don't care, but some political organization where everybody who lives on that land have equal rights. I know it sounds crazy coming from an Israeli to the US. This is an American value too. Equal rights, equal political rights, equal civil rights, the right to freedom from prison, or the right to a fair trial. Do I need to tell you all that? You know all that. You know all that. The call is very specific, and as I told you before, we have put a lot of effort in Who Profits, and you can find these results online, whoprofits.org, into identifying huge global corporations that are profiteering from the exploitation of the land, natural resources, and labor in Palestine. This is a very, very uneven situation. Corporations, they don't care about anything. They care about profit. They come in, they make profit. They make the situation stay. They make it more stable. It's our job as civil society to try and do whatever we can, to use our power as consumers, as investors, as citizens, in order to say what we want to be participant on and what we do not want to participate in. And I'll give you just one example, and this will be my final story. The flagship of the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement, the flagship of this movement, don't let anyone else tell you anything which is not, you know, like racist, anti-Semitic. No, the flagship of this movement is a campaign against a global corporation called Veolia. Veolia is a French multinational that specializes in the privatization of public services. In this city here, it operates the local bus and the local, how do you call it, tramway or the light rail. It also does that in the occupied territories. Veolia operates buses, it operates a landfill, and it operates a light rail that connects settlements to Jerusalem and to mainland Israel. This is an infrastructure project that makes the settlement economy more like to stay one-sidedly without an agreement with the other side. Why is that a problem? Because all of their services are segregated. Not segregated because, you know, Jews prefer to use them over Palestinians. Segregated. Palestinians don't get to ride in the back of the bus. They don't get on these buses. They drive on Palestinian land, confiscated from Palestinian owners, in these big highways where Palestinians are not allowed near the road even. They cannot use these buses. Communities all around the world have protested against Veolia services all around the world and have cost this company over $13 billion in lost contracts. And I ask you, or people around here who are looking for something good to do the same over here. Use these transportation services here to the city in order to tell Veolia what you think about their crimes in Palestine. Thank you.